All right. Well, hello. Welcome, everybody, to our third installment in a series dedicated to careers in maritime. We are pleased to bring you this content as you seek to learn more about and select career paths within the vast maritime industry. Today's session on supply chain will be presented by Connor Helm, an International Propeller Club member and president of the New York, New Jersey Port Chapter. Now I'd like to turn it over and introduce our very own Dr. Jeremy Smith, International VP of Student Ports, who's been working to bring us this great content and further develop and strengthen our student port chapters. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Jeremy Smith.
Thank you so much. Everyone, today we have our guest speaker, Connor Helm. Mr. Helm is an ocean freight professional with experience in freight forwarding, vessel operations, container terminal operations, and he is an active licensed customs broker. Mr. Helm is a graduate of Massachusetts Maritime Academy with a Bachelor of Science in International Maritime Business. He has a strong passion for maritime education and advancements in technology within the maritime industry. Currently, Mr. Helm is serving on the International Propeller Club of the United States Board of Directors, and he is the president of the New York, New Jersey chapter. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Connor Helm.
Cool. Hey, everyone. I guess I should probably share my screen before we get started. Oh, that was a mistake. Share my screen here. Okay, so we're going to get started here right now. So thank you to the International Propeller Club for allowing me to be the second speaker on the International Speaker Series. Today is all about me teaching a little bit about what I do on a day-to-day and also just about the industry in general, which is freight forwarding. It's very broad. There's a lot of different roles and opportunities within this space. And I just want to kind of shed some light on it. It's an industry which I really didn't have much exposure to until I joined my current company. But we're going to get into all of that in the upcoming slides. So today's topics, we're going to talk a little bit about who I am. I want to make sure that everyone on this call has a understanding of where I came from and how I got to where I currently am at my role at Flexport. Do a brief overview, freight forwarding 101. What is freight forwarding? This is going to be super high level, right? I'm not going to be able to teach you every single thing about this multi-trillion-dollar industry in just 30 minutes, but I am going to try to give you just a high level on what freight forwarding is, what as a company we do, and then what are some of the roles within freight forwarding that you could get into, why it's such a great career, and then some of the tips and skills that I've kind of gathered or can share with you that I think that will be super helpful for you as a young professional or even still in college. So let's talk about who I am. So I didn't include some personal stuff on here, but we'll start with there, right? So born in Philadelphia, grew up in southern New Jersey. Then I went up to Massachusetts in Buzzards Bay, Massachusetts, to go to Massachusetts Maritime Academy. So that was back in 2015. I got my degree in international maritime business and actually graduated a semester early in 2018. So first lesson learned here, do not be in a rush to graduate college. You have your entire life and your entire professional career in front of you. I was very much eager to graduate and get a job as soon as possible, start making some real money. But in hindsight, I think maybe I would have taken that extra semester to just not have as many responsibilities and really just take it all in, learn as much as possible. And so that's my first piece of advice. I know we're not the tips section yet, but I would advise to do that. So here I have a picture of, we actually have a yearbook, which is not that common in college, but this was our yearbook at Mass Maritime. I wanted to include this mainly because of my senior year quote, which was Philly, Philly. If you're a football fan, you'll know this is when the Eagles beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. And that was a big moment for me being up in Massachusetts. So that's a little bit about my educational background. Some other, you heard Jeremy mention, I have experience in operations, vessel operations, terminal operations, and that really goes from my internships. And I count those as experience because quite frankly, they were great experiences for me, and led to what I believe to be where I'm at today. A lot of building blocks there. So this is a picture of me in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, in the middle of January. So I was freezing. I actually had to go out and buy that jacket because I didn't bring one for some reason. And so, yeah, middle of January, Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. This is the shipyard where a lot of the vessels actually get laid up for the winter. If you're familiar with the Great Lakes, it's fresh water, they freeze. So they can't operate these vessels in the wintertime usually. This year was warmer, so they were able to operate a little bit longer. But yeah, so this internship, I was a vessel operations intern. Really what that means was I was a sponge. I was just doing whatever I possibly could to, provide some value. This was a paid internship. I wanted to make sure that I was providing value to the company, because they certainly were providing value to me. It was one of the best experiences that I've had, as a young professional, being able to kind of just be engulfed in a vessel owner operator who operates, I think they operate 11 vessels now, throughout the Great Lakes. And it was really a great experience and out of my comfort zone. I was never been in Cleveland before, never, traveled like that. So it was a super cool experience that I got to do. The next one, I was actually an intern at the Packard Marine Terminal. And so this is, boots on the ground, working in an ocean carrier, ocean terminal, moving containers around. We're also doing some ro-ro operations, so moving cars in and out of these ro-ros. And this experience particularly is why I got the job at Flexport, where I currently work. I mean, I was, boots on the ground, boarding ships every single day, doing the safety inspections for those ships, to make sure that the unionized labor at the terminal, it was safe for them to board the vessel and start unloading the containers. So again, really cool experience. It was close to home too, so I didn't have to, pay for rent or anything. So that was really awesome. This picture is actually of me on top of a post-Panamax crane. So all those new cranes you keep hearing about, to allow some of these bigger vessels to come in, and since they upgraded the Panama Canal. And so really, really cool experience. And I definitely credit this to why I most likely why I got the job at Flexport. So we'll talk a little bit about internships in the tips section, because I think this is super important for any young professional or a new grad, regardless of if it's offered by your school or not. Leads me to professional experience. So first job out of school, it was a short stint. I like to call it a cup of coffee at a company called Weeks Marine. They were actually recently purchased by a company called Kiewit, which is one of the largest construction firms throughout the country. I was a part of their marine services division. So I was working with their tugs and barges, which were kind of supporting the larger dredging operation, which was the real moneymaker at Weeks Marine. Now, this was a job that I actually got through the career fair at the school that I went to at Mass Maritime. And I ended up taking it because it was really the best offer that I had at the time. I had dollar signs in my mind, right? And as I'm sure a lot of these young professionals on the call also can agree. I mean, that's on your mind, right? Like, how much money can I make? And again, we'll talk about that in the tips section, because I don't think that's the best way to go about it. And honestly, that was the lesson that I learned here, was that don't chase the money. There's a lot of opportunities out there that may be entry level and may not pay the best, but getting your foot in the door at a really good company is very valuable, and a lot of times will be more valuable for your career in the future, by kind of taking some of that risk there. So I had a short stint there until I found a job that I was super interested in, which was Flexport. And here's a picture of me. This was actually just I believe 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half. This is me in Agra, India. That's the Taj Mahal. I'm sure you're familiar with it. And so this is me with one of my colleagues from Singapore, and then our origin team, Rahul. He's to the right of me, but to the left of this picture. He's from India, lives in India, and what a cool experience to be able to travel around the world and really get my boots on the ground in India, a market that I serve quite a bit right now. So to start at Flexport, I was in operations, right? I just mentioned entry-level jobs. We're going to talk a little bit about entry-level jobs and freight forwarding in a few slides, but Operations is typically your foot in the door to freight forwarding. And frankly, it's the best way for a young professional, a new grad, to get experience in freight forwarding. You really get to see kind of the full shipment life cycle from start to finish. And you really start to learn kind of the nuts and bolts of how freight forwarding works, how a shipment moves from one country to another. That's operations. And so got my foot in the door with operations. I think it was pretty clear that to my employer that I was very interested in kind of the more maritime side of the business, so like the ocean freight side of the business, not so much the U.S. rail or trucking, which is still really good opportunities, and we'll talk about those. But for me personally, I'm a maritime guy. I really enjoyed the maritime piece. So I ended up getting an opportunity to move over to a new role, which was trade lane management. And so that's a very broad term, but really I got to own the ocean portion of that shipment life cycle, right? So container gets picked up at origin, it gets trucked to the port, and then once it gets to the port, that's kind of where I picked up. And so we'll talk more about what that is that I do in my role day to day. But in general, I'm working with ocean carriers every day and supporting our clients, making sure that they are loading on these vessels and coming to North America. And then finally, my U.S. customs broker license. Again, I'm going to talk about this briefly in upcoming slides because this is an opportunity, I think, for everyone on this call. I think everyone should do it. I didn't even know what it was when I first took it, but I ended up doing my customs broker license in 2020, right in the midst of COVID. My company actually paid for me to do it. And I think, we'll talk about it again, but I think it's a really good opportunity for everyone on this call to kind of get a leg up on the competition, and the competition being your shipmates or your other your other students. You're going to be competing against them to get jobs, right? And this is kind of a leg up, I think, if you're able to do it. So we'll talk about that in the upcoming slide. Okay, so now we're just gonna, what is freight forwarding? Like freight forwarding 101, back to the basics. Freight forwarding is it's just the intermediary. Freight forwarders are the intermediary between shippers, cargo owners, and then the transportation providers. So by shippers, that's really manufacturers, the people who are making the goods, and then the cargo owners. Those are the companies that you see every single day. Those are the Nikes, the Lululemons, the Apples of the world. Though they are buying the cargo from those manufacturers. And then the shipper, the service provider, or the ocean carriers, the airlines, the trucking providers. And so the freight forwarder is kind of right in the middle of all those things, connecting all those parties, making sure that the cargo gets from the manufacturer to the warehouse or the customer door, depending on what the setup is. So said simply, we get cargo from point A to point B. We do everything in between. You can see here, from getting it to the origin port to getting it all the way to the warehouse, and all the little pieces in between, the customs, the trucking, the rail movements, etc. So there's plenty there. And then so what freight forwarding really does is it enables globalization, right? So globalization is probably the biggest or the most influential invention, if you will, in modern day society, right? We are able to trade with every single country in the world and manufacture in countries that are not close to home. This happened as a lot of manufacturing was in the U.S. and then we started to shift it because labor was cheaper, raw materials were cheaper in other countries, and so we're able to do to have more globalization through trade. And the enablers of trade is freight forwarding or freight forwarders, and so that is kind of our role in this global supply chain. And then some of the other value-added services that freight forwarders often provide, they don't all provide this, but most of them do, is customs. So, working with either the origin country customs, so in my instance, like India or Bangladesh, working with their customs teams to make sure that we clear customs out, and then clear customs within the U.S. Then there's insurance, making sure that if you do have cargo on that vessel, if anything happens, if it falls off the vessel or if it lights on fire, God forbid, you are covered. So that's often a value-added service. And then finance, right? Helping those companies buying those goods, finance those goods to get them to the US. And then, you have terms with them they'll pay you back in 60 days, 90 days, something like that. So these are, typical value-added services for freight forwarding, and roles are available in all of these aspects, right? And we'll touch on that shortly. So here are some of the roles. Operations, I mentioned this. This is kind of the heart of every freight forwarding company. It is, the documentation, the exceptions management, like, hey, my shipment got pulled for a customs exam, and coordinating with customs to make sure that that exam goes smoothly, and then you can get the goods out into the customer. FDA exams, right? A lot of food gets pulled for Food and Drug Administration exams. Regular delays, like for example, on Tuesday, the ports of New York, New Jersey were completely closed because we got a little bit of a snowstorm. I think everyone in the Northeast got it, but dealing with things like that on a day-to-day, and that's how I started. I was, doing exception management and making sure that our clients were aware that, hey, the terminal's closed because of snow, you're not going to get your cargo for another day. And so really operations are at the core of every single freight forwarding role and company. Then you have sales and account management. And I would say that these three kind of pillars here are the core pillars, but there is a lot of other roles as well. So sales and account management. So you're really the face of the operation. So you are the client-facing person. You're either selling your services to that client, or you are the kind of go-to person if there's an issue that arises. And then that account manager will funnel those issues to the operators and be like, hey, why is our container not moving? And then the operator will tell you, because the port's closed, right? And then so the account manager just overall just manages that client. And then you get into commercial, and this is where I live. I'm in the commercial side of the business. So you have ocean, air, and trucking procurement. So, what is procurement? Procurement is I buy space from ocean carriers, and I then, price it and then sell it internally to our teams, who then go in and sell it to our clients. So that's what I do at a very high level. I am buying space on vessels and selling it to our clients. Within the commercial realm, you also have pricing. So making sure that space that you buy from the carriers, that you're pricing it correctly in the market, and then selling it to the client, right? Like your client's not going to buy your space on that vessel if you're $1,000 more expensive, right? So you got to make sure that you're in tune with what's going on in the market and really the economy. Then you have fulfillment, right? So I buy the space, I price the space, then I got to make sure that that client loads on that space. That's a really important part of this. And so these are some of the, the roles available within, freight forwarding. But again, there are a ton of kind of sub roles within all of these kind of bigger sections that are available. And it really, the options are kind of endless there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, what some of the experiences that I've gone through. And so, I'm a young professional. I'm only 27. So I didn't graduate college that long ago. And so it's been kind of a whirlwind since I joined this industry. From what I understand, before I joined it, it was a little bit more smooth, and maybe someone can fact check me on that, but there wasn't all these kind of crazy crises happening every single day, seemingly. So when I first started, we had probably within a few months of me starting, we had the one APIS, the ONE APIS. So that's Ocean Network Express. This vessel had the worst container cargo loss, I believe, in history, outside of total loss at vessel. Over 1,800 containers went overboard, and many more of them were damaged. And so this happened off the coast of Hawaii, a couple hundred miles off the coast. The vessel ended up not continuing to LA where it was supposed to go. It went back to Tokyo. And so as an operator, I have to explain to our clients that had containers on that vessel, why was that vessel not showing up? Well, you can show them a picture and I think they could figure it out, right? Like that's a pretty devastating situation there. We even had, in some instances, our clients' cargo went overboard. So like helping them coordinate, what are they supposed to do when that happens? And so that was definitely a pretty crazy event that I got the chance to work through, and definitely some lessons learned there. Of course, COVID, I didn't even put any explanation bullets there because I think we all know what happened during COVID, but in freight forwarding specifically, it was a moment in time where when COVID first happened, nobody was shipping anything. No one knew what was going on. And so volume went down significantly. Demand for cargo went down until we got a couple months in and people realized, hey, I can't go to the bar. I can't go to the restaurant. So I'm going to start buying stuff on Amazon. And so then demand spiked, went through the roof. And I'm sure that you've seen this maybe reported, but there was 100+ vessels off of LA Long Beach waiting to unload. This was mainly driven by a huge surge of demand because of COVID and because of our buying behaviors during that time. So that was certainly a lesson learned and an interesting experience. Rates also went through the roof. There were some containers that typically would load at around $2,000 for a 40-foot container. During this period of time, we were loading containers at $20,000. So, like that's a huge, it's a burden on the customer, right? Because they may be shipping, paper products or, toilet paper or nuts and bolts and, increasing the freight rate all the way to $20,000. They might not even be making any money when they sell that cargo. So, understanding those dynamics was definitely something very interesting and a great experience. So that was, when I was in operations. Then when I got into procurement, these other two situations happened. So the Ever Given, this is very well documented. The Ever Given was stuck in the Suez Canal for 6 days, and it blocked all transit, all traffic for, container vessels, bulk carriers, tankers, everything was halted. And it was disrupting about $10 billion of trade every single day. So you can imagine the exception management that came out of that, right? Like, what's my cargo doing? Like, where is it at? Where is it sitting? And so that was obviously an interesting experience. And then bring us to even just yesterday, the Red Sea attacks. This is probably the biggest story in ocean shipping right now, for all containers, tankers, etc. Is the ongoing attacks from Yemen Houthis on commercial vessels with civilian sailors, missile attacks, targets. And this is severely disrupting the global supply chain right now because all of these vessels, mainly container vessels, are going all the way around Africa, around the Cape of Good Hope, which is adding transit time, it's adding costs, and severely disrupting the global supply chain. The one good thing is that ocean carriers have now all diverted, all the major ocean carriers. So not putting civilian sailors at risk is obviously the number one goal there, which is great to see that's finally started to happen. Because at first there were still vessels sailing through there, so that was kind of problematic. But so these are some of the experiences that I've had, and I just wanted to kind of share this as these aren't great experiences, right? Like they're not good. These are all kind of scary situations or very disruptive situations. But nonetheless, like the experience, it's kind of like a feather in my cap. I understand how we kind of we're agile in these situations, how we were able to calm down our clients and give them as much information as possible, and even support them on changing their routings or making sure that they get their cargo on time, regardless of what's going on in the global supply chain. So I'm sure there'll be some questions on this, and I'm happy to share more in the future. So why choose a career in freight forwarding? And so the first point is, I talked about this, there are many entry-level jobs. There are thousands of freight forwarding companies throughout the United States alone. Of course, there's other freight forwarding companies not based in the US, but based in the US, there's thousands. They range from the biggest of the big to very small, freight forwarders who may only have one or two clients and are very niche focused. So there's a ton of jobs open, particularly in operations. And so getting your foot in the door, working up an operations job to get your experience, and then maybe start to look at what are some other roles within freight forwarding that I think more suited to my interests or more suited to my skills. And that's what I was able to do, which brings me to the next point, which is the ability to pivot within your company, right? I've seen people join operations within my own company and then decide that, operations isn't what they want to do. I actually want to be a recruiter. I want to recruit people into this industry because I'm so passionate about it. Or I want to be a salesperson. I want to make money every time I sell space on that container ship. I want to get a little piece of that, right? So that's kind of the sales mentality, the more like entrepreneurial person. And so the opportunities are really endless, to kind of go within your company. And then the other piece of this is not only the internal internal transfers, right? There's also a ton of applicable jobs for your experience in freight forwarding that you could go to. And this is something that I've even thought about, like what is my next step after freight forwarding? And I've been very open about this, that, I think that it could potentially be, working for one of the companies that I help ship goods for, right? Like who is better positioned for that role of, say, a supply chain manager for, let's just pick a company like Nike, than me, who theoretically I don't move Nike, but say I move Nike from India to US, who is better positioned to be in that role other than me, who is already helping them do that, right? So being able to get experience in a freight forwarder, which is kind of client agnostic, right? Like doesn't matter which client you move the container for, and then go to a company that you are passionate about and support them in their supply chain. So that's something that I found as definitely an opportunity for me in the future, if I choose to do so. And so can kind of move around. And then finally, freight forwarding, being in freight forwarding is really a backstage pass to the economy. And my CEO says this all the time, so I'm kind of repeating him, but it's very true, right? So I know how some of the top Fortune 500 companies, who they're buying their goods from, what countries are they sourcing from, what carrier providers they like or don't like, how much they pay for those goods, and then how much they sell those goods for to people in US, Europe, etc. So really, I have a full backstage pass to what makes these companies tick and how they operate, which I think is really, really cool. I go to the mall and I see like all these signs, all these storefronts, and I'm like, oh, I ship for them, I ship for them, I ship for them. And my fiance thinks it's very annoying, but I think it's pretty cool. I have a ton of products from clients that I ship for in my apartment right now, because I just think it's really cool to be a part of that. Now, this is kind of where I'm going to close it up here, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. But here are some of the tips and skills needed, I think, for freight forwarding. So the number one thing is, this is a tip, get valuable internship and work experience. So I mentioned how important it was for me to have those 2 internships. I would say that regardless of if your school requires you to do an internship or not, to definitely try to do one. A lot of them are paid now. In the past, a lot of them were not paid. So you're kind of stuck finding a company that was local to you so you could reduce your costs, right? You don't have to pay for rent, you don't have to pay for food. You can go home to mom and dad and they can cook you a meal. Regardless, right? If you can get an internship wherever it is, it would be worth the cost, even if it was not paid. And I truly believe that. So what is the cost of a 3-credit course right now in college? It's probably like $3 to $5 grand. You might get better ROI from doing an internship than some of the courses that you're taking in college. And I think that's my opinion, but it might be a fact. We all take electives and things, right? So the value that I got, the ROI on these internships was much higher than, say, some of the random, Roman history classes that I might have taken. And so I would say, definitely try to do one wherever you can, and in a company or at a company that will be applicable to your interests, right? So like, where do you see yourself when you're a young professional? That's where you should be getting some experience. And feel free to reach out to alumni, reach out to people who work in these companies and explain this to them. You'll find that they'll be very helpful, I think. Some people are scared. I think they think people will be standoffish, which I don't think is usually true. Next, I talked about this customs exam. So I didn't know what this was before until I got to Flexport. But the customs exam is, there's only 14,000 licensed customs brokers in the United States. There are hundreds of thousands of containers moving into the United States every single week. And so these, and United States, North America, Europe, this skill or this license, it'll only cost you a couple $100 to take the exam, but it will get you a significant leg up if you're interested in joining supply chain or freight forwarding, because it's a very valuable asset. I get reached out to more on LinkedIn about me having a customs license than any of my experience that I've done in the past. So it's a course that may take you 4 to 6 months to study for and take the exam. But everything is online now. Like you see this big book. This was the book that I had to practice on. Everything is online now. And so that happened over the past couple of years. I would say if you're in your senior year, maybe even your junior year, you've got all your electives done, take some time, make your schedule so that you can focus 2 hours a day, 1 hour a day on practicing for the customs exam and take the exam. They make it seem like it's very hard.